Hello everyone, my name is Isabella Rossi, and today I want to share a story from my past that still haunts me whenever I think about it. My heart aches, and I can't help but feel responsible. It's an experience I truly wish I had never gone through. But as we all know, life rarely unfolds the way we expect. This narrative begins many years ago, when I was just 18, living with my family in the vibrant city of Boston, Massachusetts, a place full of historical charm, yet also harboring its own hidden complexities. At one point, I believed I had everything I could possibly want. My family was affluent, and both my parents were highly successful professionals. My father, David, was a busy executive, and my mother, Emily, was an interior designer with impeccable taste. Despite their demanding careers, my parents always made an effort to spend time with me and my two older brothers, Liam and Ethan. They were both 2 years my senior, and if I were to describe them, I'd say they were incredibly handsome and effortlessly charming. I always felt a sense of pride having brothers like them. As the youngest, I was undeniably pampered by my parents. They ensured I lacked nothing, whether it was material possessions or affection. Yet, if I'm being honest, I always felt that their love, strong as it was, couldn't quite compare to the deep connection I shared with Liam and Ethan. They were more than just brothers. They were my protectors, my closest companions, always watching over me and showing genuine care. What set their affection apart, in my perception, was the way they expressed it through actions and small gestures. My parents' love often manifested as providing a comfortable and secure life, but Liam and Ethan went further. They possessed an intuitive understanding of me that my parents sometimes lacked. Whenever I felt down, they could sense it without me needing to utter a single word. They were always the first people I turned to when I needed to confide in someone, and they listened without judgment. When I was younger, if I was ever hurt or picked on at school, it was always Liam and Ethan who would step in to defend me. I remember one instance vividly. I came home in tears because classmates had teased me about a dress I was wearing. Both of my brothers not only comforted me, but also went to the school themselves to address the situation. They didn't resort to violence, but their sharp words and serious demeanour were enough to ensure those bullies never dared to bother me again. In my eyes, they were heroes, always ready to stand by my side whenever I needed them. I recall those evenings when the whole family would gather, but I consistently preferred to sit nestled between Liam and Ethan on the sofa. They'd give me tight hugs, often playfully arguing over who got to sit closest to me. They'd tease that I was their little princess and that it was their lifelong duty to keep me safe. Over time, I began to sense that their bond with me was different from anyone else in the family. They were also the ones who navigated me through the sometimes awkward years of adolescence. When I started feeling insecure about my appearance, Ethan spent time teaching me how to apply makeup, gently reminding me of my own beauty just the way I was. Liam helped me choose outfits, affectionately calling me the cutest little sister in the world. They made me feel cherished, loved unconditionally. To me, my brothers weren't just family, they were my emotional anchors. When my parents were occupied with their work, Liam and Ethan made certain I was never lonely. They'd drive me to school, help me with homework, and keep me company. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, and I'd softly knock on their doors. They always welcomed me in, telling funny stories or simply sitting with me until I drifted off to sleep. Those seemingly small acts solidified my belief that their love for me ran deeper than what I received from my parents. But that profound love, the very love I believed to be so pure and unwavering, eventually became the source of my deepest regret. It's a story that is difficult to articulate and requires more time to fully unfold. I'm not certain if anyone will truly understand, but everything that transpired when I was 18 irrevocably altered the course of my life. When I can summon the courage, I will share the rest of that memory with you. I remember everything with startling clarity. As the youngest, I often acted impulsively without much thought of consequences. Sometimes I'd spontaneously jump onto their laps or simply sit right beside them as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Liam and Ethan were not only my brothers, but also my closest confidants, the people I felt most at ease with. One warm summer afternoon, I emerged from my bedroom, sunny. Light streamed through the large window, bathing the living room in a soft, comforting glow. Liam and Ethan were seated on the sofa, absorbed in watching a television show. I wasn't sure what they were viewing, but they seemed completely focused. As was my habit, I ambled over, rubbing my eyes absent-mindedly. I didn't say anything but tiptoed closer. As I approached, I noticed neither of them had registered my presence yet. A mischievous grin played on my lips. I playfully jumped onto the sofa and settled myself squarely on both of their laps. Startled, Liam flinched, and Ethan laughed, saying, "Little sister, what are you up to now?" I just giggled, offering no explanation, and made myself comfortable on their laps, resting my head on Liam's shoulder. "What are you two watching so intently?" I asked, but they didn't respond immediately. When I glanced at the TV screen, I realized they were watching a romantic film. At that precise moment, the movie reached its peak, an emotional scene where the characters shared a passionate embrace, followed by a kiss. When Liam and Ethan noticed my attention was fixed on the screen, they quickly became visibly uncomfortable. Ethan smiled awkwardly, and attempting to cover my eyes with his hand, said, "Don't look, Isabella. This isn't really a movie for kids." I laughed, playfully wiggling free from his grasp. "I'm not a kid anymore," I teased, my voice light and playful. "I'm 18. Despite his efforts to shield my eyes, I tried to peek through his fingers, still laughing as I playfully jabbed at them. In that moment, I unconsciously shifted my hands to maintain my balance on Ethan's lap. I don't know if it was intentional, but my hand brushed against something inside his pocket. The sensation, firm and warm, immediately sent my heart racing. I instinctively pulled my hand back, panic surging in my chest. I found myself unable to look at either Ethan or Liam, feeling an overwhelming rush of shame. I stammered, I'm sorry," before quickly getting up and rushing to my room. I closed the door behind me and leaned my back against it, my heart pounding as though I had committed a terrible wrong. Sitting on my bed, I couldn't shake the thought of what had just happened. Was I overthinking it, or had it been an accidental encounter? The feeling from Ethan's pocket kept replaying in my mind, making my face flush with heat. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but the shame was intense. I wondered if Liam and Ethan would simply brush it off and laugh about it later, but I couldn't stop replaying the moment. It wasn't because I had potentially touched something inappropriate. It was the unsettling feeling that I had crossed a line without fully comprehending it. It was the first time I truly grasped that the boundary between us, which I had always assumed was solid and unbreakable, was perhaps more fragile than I had ever imagined. Later that evening, after having secluded myself in my room for a while, I decided to venture downstairs. I was hungry, and I knew my family was likely gathered for dinner, but I still felt a lingering embarrassment from the earlier incident. I was unsure if Liam and Ethan were still thinking about what had happened. I tried to convince myself that perhaps it wasn't as significant as I was making it out to be. Maybe they had already forgotten. I quietly opened my door and tiptoed down the hallway, making an effort to avoid any potential eye contact with them. As I neared the living room, I paused to listen. It seemed empty, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I assumed they were probably in the kitchen or somewhere else in the house. When I entered the living room, I was surprised to find it completely unoccupied. How strange, I thought, pausing by the sofa where I had been sitting earlier. Just as I was attempting to figure out which channel had been on, I heard voices directly behind me. Ethan's voice rang out. "What are you doing, Isabella?" I jumped in shock, and Liam let out a loud laugh, saying, You look like you're trying to steal something, I yelped in surprise, quickly turning around to see both of them standing there. The suddenness of their appearance made my heart skip a beat, and we all reacted with a start simultaneously. Ethan and Liam burst into laughter while I stood there, holding my chest, a mix of startled and amused. You two scared me half to death, I exclaimed, trying to feign annoyance but unable to suppress my own laughter. What about you? You look like you're up to something shady, Liam teased, raising an eyebrow playfully. Ethan patted my head affectionately, adding, You weren't planning on sneaking a snack, were you? I laughed along with them, and the lingering awkwardness from earlier seemed to dissipate. I thought to myself that what I had touched couldn't possibly have been what I suspected. Otherwise, Liam and Ethan wouldn't be acting so light-hearted and laughing like this. That thought offered me a sense of relief, and I tried my best to act as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. I was just, checking to see if anyone was here, I stammered, attempting to steer the conversation away from the moment. What were you two doing sneaking up behind me? Were you trying to scare me? Liam shrugged, feigning seriousness. Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little fright, but I didn't expect you to jump quite that much, Ethan added with a chuckle. Who would have thought you'd react like that? Your face was priceless. We all burst out laughing, the tension finally melting away completely. At that moment, Ethan put his hand on my shoulder and said, All right, let's go eat. The whole family's waiting for you. I nodded, smiling, and followed them into the kitchen where everyone had gathered. My parents greeted me with warm smiles. I sat down at the table, feeling a sense of peace in the comforting light that surrounded us. During dinner, the conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter. My parents spoke about their day at work, and Liam and Ethan occasionally teased me with light-hearted jokes. I joined in the conversation, and the earlier feelings of embarrassment seemed to completely vanish. After dinner, I helped my mother clear the dishes, then headed to my room to get ready for bed. As I lay in bed that night, I thought back to the events of the afternoon. Although I still felt a slight tinge of embarrassment about what had happened on the sofa, the anxiousness had subsided. I smiled to myself, reassuring myself that everything was fine. Liam and Ethan were still the wonderful brothers they had always been, and I drifted off to sleep peacefully, convinced that the awkward incident was now entirely behind us. But I was mistaken. My room and theirs were separated only by a thin wall, and even the faintest sounds, whether from a movie or music, could easily travel through. One morning, I, who was known for sleeping in late, woke up at the unusually early hour of 7 a.m. At first, I thought I had been jolted awake by a dream I couldn't recall, or perhaps the sunlight filtering through the curtains had startled me. But as I became more fully awake, I realized there was an unusual sound emanating from the adjacent room. My bedroom was situated between Liam's and Ethan's rooms, and our house was built in a traditional style with relatively thin walls. This meant that if someone played music or watched TV loudly, the sounds could easily reach the other rooms. I was accustomed to hearing Liam and Ethan chatting or playing video games, but the sound I heard that morning was different. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct enough to capture my attention. Initially, I thought they were simply watching an action movie or something similar, but after a few minutes, a sense of unease began to settle over me. The sounds were unlike the typical noise from a film. They were intermittent, sometimes slow, sometimes quick. My heart started to race, and a thought crossed my mind that made my face grow hot. I didn't want to believe it, but as the sounds became clearer, I became certain it wasn't music or normal conversation. It was a series of rapid, sensual sounds mixed with heavy breathing. I desperately tried to stop myself from processing what I was hearing, but the more I listened, the more certain I became. I could no longer ignore the possibility that Liam and Ethan were likely watching something of an adult nature. A wave of intense embarrassment washed over me, and I wondered why I had to be awake to overhear this. My heart pounded so fast I thought it might burst, and my entire body felt feverish. I raised my hands to cover my face, attempting to block out the inappropriate thoughts swirling in my head. This is private, I told myself. But what made it even more unsettling was hearing these sounds specifically coming from their room. We had always shared such a close bond, and I had never imagined being in a situation like this. I didn't want to hear it anymore, but the sound seemed to cling to me, growing louder in my perception. I sat up in bed, then quietly opened my door. I wasn't sure exactly what I intended to do, but the anxiety in my chest made it impossible to remain still any longer. I walked softly down the hallway, trying to make as little noise as possible. But as I reached the door to their room, the sound was so clear it felt as though the walls no longer existed between us. I stood frozen just outside the door, feeling a chaotic mix of embarrassment and confusion. My heart hammered against my ribs, and my thoughts were a jumbled mess. I knew that hearing intimate sounds was likely something everyone experienced at some point. But hearing them from Liam and Ethan's room was profoundly different for me. I had no idea how to react. I bit my lip, uncertain whether I should retreat back to my room or continue standing there, drawn in by the sounds. I pressed my ear gently against the door, trying to steady my breathing, but the noise seemed to overwhelm all rational thought. Part of me urged me to turn around and leave immediately, but another part felt irresistibly drawn in, unable to pull away from the compelling sounds. Suddenly, the door opened, and I instinctively stepped back in shock. Ethan stood there, his eyes wide with surprise, looking as though he had just been caught in a compromising situation. I stood frozen, utterly speechless. We both stared at each other in a thick silence that felt like an eternity. The silence was heavy and suffocating, making it difficult to breathe. Ethan cleared his throat and attempted to break the tension. "Isabella, what are you doing standing here?" His voice was shaky, betraying his embarrassment. He was clearly trying to sound calm but failing to hide his discomfort. He scratched the back of his head, avoiding my gaze. Ethan's face was flushed red with embarrassment. I was no better. My heart was pounding, and my entire body felt hot with shame. I lowered my head, unable to meet his eyes, and mumbled, I was just, passing by." My words were weak and unconvincing, but they were the only ones I could manage in that moment. Just then, the sounds from inside the room stopped abruptly, and Liam emerged from behind Ethan. His face mirrored Ethan's expression, red and full of awkwardness. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away, unable to make eye contact with either of us. We all stood there, unsure of what to say or do. The tension between us was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife, and it seemed like none of us knew how to break it. I managed a nervous smile, running my hand through my hair in a futile attempt to hide my discomfort. "I was just passing by," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "It's nothing, I'm leaving." I turned quickly and practically ran back to my room, desperate to escape the incredibly awkward situation as fast as I could. I could feel their eyes on me as I left, though I didn't dare to look back. When I reached my room, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, taking a deep, shaky breath. My heart was still racing, and I felt as though I had just been caught witnessing something I absolutely shouldn't have. The embarrassment lingered in my chest, and I couldn't stop thinking about that moment, the way Ethan and Liam had looked at me, the suffocating silence that followed. It all replayed in my mind over and over. I tried desperately to push the negative thoughts away, but the more I tried, the stronger and more persistent they became. I kept telling myself that this was just an unexpected situation, something none of us had wanted to happen. But I couldn't help but wonder if it had irrevocably changed things between us forever. A short while later, there was a soft knock on my door. My heart sank. I knew it wasn't my parents, as they usually just walked in when they needed me. It could only be Liam or Ethan. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves before opening the door. Ethan stood there, looking just as embarrassed as he had moments before. He avoided my gaze, his hands fidgeting awkwardly at his sides. "Isabella," he said, his voice soft and hesitant. "I'm really sorry about what happened just now. It's not what you think. We were just watching a movie, and maybe the timing was really bad." I stood there for a moment, hesitating, unsure of how to respond. I could see the uncertainty and discomfort in Ethan's eyes. Then, Liam stepped into the doorway behind him. He looked equally uncomfortable, his eyes darting between me and Ethan, seemingly searching for the right words. No one spoke for a few moments. The silence, once again, was thick, and I knew we were all struggling to figure out how to move past this incredibly awkward encounter. I realized that if this tension persisted, it would only make things worse for all of us. So, I decided I had to be the one to break the silence. I offered an awkward smile, trying desperately to appear casual despite the swirling tension. "Come on," I said, trying to sound light-hearted. "Don't look so tense." "I was just passing by, really." "It's fine." Liam and Ethan exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication passing between them. After a brief pause, Ethan let out a sigh, a hint of a smile returning to his face. "Really, Isabella? You're okay with this? You're not uncomfortable?" I quickly nodded, trying my best to reassure them both. "Yeah, I'm fine. Honestly, I think we all just feeling a little awkward about it." Then, in an attempt to make things easier, I suggested, "How about the three of us just sit down and talk? Maybe it'll help us clear the air." Both Liam and Ethan seemed surprised by my offer, but after a moment of hesitant deliberation, they both agreed. We went into my room, and I sat down on the edge of my bed. I decided to try and inject some humour to ease the remaining tension. I looked at Liam and teased playfully. "So, the movie was that good? You both completely lost track of time." Liam laughed awkwardly, covering his face with his hands. "Come on, Isabella, stop teasing me. It's just that. Well, we didn't expect you to hear." "Really?" I asked, raising my eyebrows playfully. "I thought maybe you guys turned it up so I could hear." We both laughed, and a significant portion of the awkwardness finally melted away. After a little while, my curiosity, which had been simmering beneath the surface, got the better of me. I glanced at Liam and Ethan, wondering if I should voice the thought that had crossed my mind. After a brief moment of hesitation, I gathered my courage and decided to speak. How about we try something like in the movie?" The words tumbled out before I could stop myself. I wasn't sure how they would react, but I felt a surge of curiosity, an undeniable urge I couldn't ignore. Liam and Ethan looked at me in stunned surprise. Are you serious?" Ethan asked, his voice full of confusion and disbelief. I nodded, trying to keep my expression serious and steady. "I'm just curious," I said softly, not daring to look directly at either of them. "It wouldn't hurt to just try it, right?" "No way," Liam replied immediately, shaking his head firmly. They both turned away, clearly uncomfortable and unsettled by my suggestion. But I wasn't ready to give up. I reached out and gently squeezed both of their hands, partly to reassure them, but also to steady myself. "Just try it once," I whispered. I want to know what it feels like." After what felt like a long, drawn-out silence, Ethan sighed and finally spoke. "Okay, but just this once, and we keep it a secret. No one can ever know." His voice was low and serious, emphasizing the absolute importance of the boundaries he was trying to set. The room was quiet then, save for the sound of our breathing. My heart pounded in my chest as we began. Each movement was cautious, tentative, yet charged with an undeniable intensity born of curiosity and the gravity of the moment. I couldn't tell how much time had passed. It felt as though everything else in the world had simply faded away, leaving only the three of us in that quiet space. When it was over, the morning sunlight streamed more fully into the room, and a profound, peaceful silence settled over us. We didn't speak. We simply lay there next to each other, our breathing gradually evening out. The tension I had feared would follow was gone, replaced by what felt like an even deeper, unspoken connection. We eventually got up and headed to the kitchen together to prepare some lunch, and everything felt unexpectedly natural, almost as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But deep down, I knew that the boundary between us had irrevocably shifted. As we sat down to eat, Ethan smiled at me and asked softly, Are you okay?" I nodded, returning his smile. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice a little shaky. "And I think I love you both even more now." I felt my words rush out, but they simply held my hand, smiling back at me with warmth and affection. "You too," they murmured in unison. And so, we continued our meal, understanding that our relationship had changed in a fundamental way. Yet in that moment, there was no regret, only a deeper bond, one that would remain unspoken but crystal clear between the three of us. From that day forward, everything felt different. But in a subtle, almost imperceptible way, our relationship, once defined by the pure and simple bond of siblings, had now crossed an invisible line. The intimacy we had always shared had evolved into something far more complex. Every time we looked into each other's eyes, there was a new layer of understanding, a deeper connection that hadn't been present before. We never explicitly talked about what happened, but we were acutely aware of the unspoken bond that now existed, shifting the dynamics between us in ways that were difficult to articulate. Yet, while the transformation in our relationship was undeniable, deep down, a quiet part of me knew that what we had done wasn't right. The boundary we had crossed was fundamentally wrong. We had succumbed to youthful curiosity, and while it had brought us closer in some aspects, it had also left a lasting mark on my conscience. I couldn't ignore the fact that we had broken some fundamental, unwritten rules, even if it felt unintentional at the time. Our actions had altered the way I perceived the world, and the weight of it pressed heavily upon me. Sometimes, even now, I still feel the anxiety creeping in when I reflect on that pivotal moment. The initial awkwardness hasn't completely vanished. It lingers just beneath the surface. Whenever I look at Liam or Ethan, I can sense the subtle change in the air, an unspoken tension that persists. We never discussed what happened again, almost as if there was a silent, mutual agreement to simply forget it and move forward. But the way they interact with me now is undeniably different. They are more careful, gentler in their actions and words, almost as though they are afraid of somehow hurting me, even though I know their love for me is unwavering. As for me, I can't help but feel my heart race every time I meet their eyes. There's a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety, a feeling I had never experienced before. The raw curiosity of youth had led us down this path, one that was filled with emotions we were ill-equipped to handle. Our connection is undeniably stronger now, but it's also far more complicated. And I know, deep down, that things will never truly be the same again. Looking back, I realize just how impulsive and immature I was. Our actions, guided by intense curiosity and raw emotion, led us to cross a line that should never have been crossed. I can't say I fully regret the depth of connection it created, but I also cannot deny the lingering feeling of guilt and confusion that accompanies the memory. It haunts me, a constant reminder that curiosity, while a powerful force, can sometimes lead us down dangerous and irreversible paths. We may not have intended for things to unfold the way they did, but they did, and now we are left to navigate the complex consequences.